She works as a maid to save her grandma. Then a millionaire falls in love with her. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The imposing iron gates of Harrison Estate loomed before Emma Walker as she clutched her worn leather purse with trembling fingers. At 27, she had never imagined herself applying for a position as a housekeeper in one of Boston's most magnificent mansions. Yet here she stood, her honey brown hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing the only formal outfit she owned, a simple navy dress she'd purchased for her college graduation 5 years ago. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, taking a deep breath of the crisp autumn air. For Grandma Rose, the memory of her grandmother's fragile form in the hospital bed that morning strengthened her resolve. The doctors had been clear. Without the experimental treatment that insurance wouldn't cover, Rose's condition would continue to deteriorate. The astronomical cost of the medication meant Emma needed this job desperately. As she approached the massive oak doors, they swung open before she could knock. A silver-haired man in an impeccable suit greeted her with a slight bow. "Miss Walker, I presume?" "I'm Walter, the head of household staff. Mr. Harrison is expecting you." Emma followed. Walter through the marble-floored foyer, trying not to gape at the museum-quality artwork adorning the walls. Despite the mansion's opulence, she couldn't help but notice how sterile it felt, like a beautiful empty shell lacking warmth or life. Walter led her to a cavernous study where floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls. Behind an imposing mahogany desk sat Blake Harrison, his attention fixed on a computer screen. At 35, Blake Harrison had built Harrison Pharmaceuticals into a multi-billion-dollar empire. His dark hair was immaculately styled. His tailored charcoal suit probably cost more than Emma's entire year's salary at her previous job. Yet it was his eyes that captured her attention, piercing blue, but somehow devoid of warmth, like Arctic ice. "Mr. Harrison, Miss Emma Walker has arrived for her interview," Walter announced before quietly disappearing. Blake didn't look up immediately. When he finally did, his gaze was analytical, as if she were a specimen under a microscope. "You're younger than I expected," he said, his voice deep and measured. "Your references from the Henderson family were quite impressive, but they mentioned nothing about your age." Emma stood straighter. "I assure you, Mr. Harrison, my age doesn't affect my work ethic. I maintained the Henderson estate for 3 years while completing my nursing studies." This caught his attention. "Nursing? Why would someone with medical training apply to be a housekeeper?" The question stung, but Emma kept her composure. "Sometimes life doesn't follow the path we plan, sir." A flash of something, curiosity perhaps, flickered across his face. "Indeed. Walter tells me you requested a flexible schedule for hospital visits. Explain." Emma hesitated, weighing how much to reveal. "My grandmother raised me after my parents died. She's currently hospitalized with a rare form of cardiomyopathy. I'm her only family." Blake's expression remained impassive, but he studied her more intently now. "I see. And you need this position to afford her care." It wasn't a question, but Emma nodded. "The treatment she needs is experimental. Insurance won't cover it." For a brief moment, something shifted in Blake's eyes, a flicker of recognition, perhaps even empathy, before the cold mask returned. "My household runs with precision, Miss Walker. I expect excellence and discretion. Hospital visits must not interfere with your primary responsibilities here." "They won't, Mr. Harrison." He stood abruptly, towering over her. "Walter will show you the estate and explain your duties. You'll start tomorrow, 6 a.m. Emma blinked, in surprise. I got the job? Just like that?" Blake's mouth twitched in what might have been amusement. "Unless you've changed your mind?" "No, I mean thank you. I won't disappoint you." As Walter returned to escort her out, Blake called after her. "Miss Walker?" She turned back. "Yes, Mr. Harrison?" "Which hospital is your grandmother in?" "Boston Memorial, sir. East Wing." He nodded curtly, already returning to his computer. "That will be all." As Emma followed Walter through the grand hallways of her new workplace, she couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just happened, that in some inexplicable way, her life had just changed course. What she didn't know was that Blake Harrison was already making a phone call to Boston Memorial Hospital, inquiring about one Rose Walker and the experimental treatment she so desperately needed. The first week at Harrison Estate proved more challenging than Emma anticipated. Each morning she arrived before dawn, as the mansion's shadowy corridors gradually brightened with daylight. The vastness of the place was overwhelming. 12 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, 3 kitchens, and countless other rooms that seemed to serve no purpose except to display wealth. Blake Harrison himself remained an enigma. He kept irregular hours, sometimes leaving before Emma arrived, other times working late into the night in his study. Their interactions were brief and formal, yet Emma occasionally caught him watching her from doorways or across hallways, his expression unreadable. On Friday morning, Emma was dusting the bookshelves in the library when she noticed a collection of medical journals. Unable to resist, she pulled one down, flipping through an article about cardiac research. "Find something interesting?" Blake's voice startled her so badly she nearly dropped the journal. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harrison," Emma stammered, hastily returning the book. "I shouldn't have. You understand medical literature?" He approached, his typical cold demeanor tinged with curiosity. "I completed 3 years of nursing school before I had to withdraw," she admitted. Blake studied her with newfound interest. "To care for your grandmother?" "Yes. She raised me after my parents died, in a car accident when I was 8. When she got sick, there wasn't really a choice." Something flashed across his face, recognition perhaps, before his expression closed again. "Your phone has been buzzing," he noted. "You should check it." Emma hadn't even heard it. When she glanced at the screen, her heart dropped. 3 missed calls from the hospital. "I need to make a call," she said, her voice tight with worry. "It's the hospital." Blake nodded stiffly. "Use my office, it's more private." The conversation was brief but devastating. Her grandmother had suffered a setback. The doctor recommended increasing her medication, which meant even higher costs. When Emma emerged, she tried to compose herself, but Blake was waiting, observing her distress with calculating eyes. "Is everything all right?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "My grandmother needs additional treatment," Emma said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I should get back to work." As she moved to pass him, Blake spoke again. "Take the rest of the day. Visit her." Emma stopped. "I couldn't. My driver will take you," he continued as if she hadn't spoken. "Walter can manage today." Before she could thank him, Blake had already turned away, phone in hand, seemingly dismissing both her and the conversation. Only later, sitting beside her grandmother's hospital bed, did Emma wonder about the swift change in her normally rigid employer. She couldn't know that Blake was in his office, pulling up files on the cardiac treatment program at Harrison Pharmaceuticals, looking for something that might help Rose Walker, or that he was remembering another hospital 20 years earlier, when he'd been the one sitting alone beside a bed, watching someone he loved slip away. Emma's routine at Harrison Estate settled into a rhythm. Each morning, she'd arrive before sunrise, prepare Blake's coffee, black, 1 sugar, and ensure the bar. Mansion was immaculate. Their interactions remained brief but gradually less tense. 3 weeks into her employment, Emma arrived to find Blake in the kitchen, still in yesterday's clothes, surrounded by papers. "You haven't slept," she observed, forgetting professional boundaries. Blake looked up with bloodshot eyes. "Pharmaceutical patents wait for no one, Miss Walker." Emma hesitated, then poured him fresh coffee. "My grandmother always says even the most important work suffers without rest." "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman," he replied, surprising her with the personal response. "She is. She taught science for 40 years before retiring." Blake sipped his coffee, studying Emma over the rim. "Is that where your interest in medicine comes from?" "Partly," Emma smiled, warming to the rare conversation. "Though watching her care for neighbors who couldn't afford doctors probably influenced me more." Something in Blake's expression shifted. Admirable, he murmured, though Emma couldn't tell if he meant her grandmother's actions or her own aspirations. That afternoon, Emma was organizing the library when she discovered a photograph hidden between books, a young Blake with an older couple all smiling. She'd never seen him smile before. That was taken a month before they died. Blake's voice came from behind her. Emma jumped, nearly dropping the frame. "I'm sorry, I was just... my parents," he continued, taking the photo. "Car accident. I was 15. Understanding bloomed within Emma. "My parents died in a crash too. I was 8. Their eyes met, a moment of unexpected connection. "Who raised you?" Emma asked softly. "No one." Blake's voice hardened. "The family lawyer managed my trust fund. I was sent to boarding school, then straight to business school. Harrison Pharmaceuticals was waiting." "That sounds lonely," Emma whispered before she could stop herself. Blake stiffened. "I learned self-reliance. It serves me well." Emma thought of her grandmother's warm kitchen, of being held during nightmares. "There's strength in needing others too." "A luxury some can't afford," Blake replied, replacing the photograph. "Speaking of which, shouldn't you be leaving for your hospital visit?" Emma checked her watch. "You're right. Thank you for reminding me." As she gathered her things, Blake cleared his throat. "How is she? Your grandmother?" "Stable, but..." Emma hesitated. "The specialist says she needs to be in a clinical trial for the new cardio-regenerative therapy. Without it..." She couldn't finish. Blake's expression remained unreadable. "Harrison Pharmaceuticals is running such trials." Emma's heart skipped. "I know. That's actually why I applied here. I thought maybe. But it was silly. The waiting list is years long." "Nothing is silly about fighting for family," Blake said quietly. "Go. You'll be late." Only after Emma left did Blake make a call to his research director about the cardio-regenerative trials, asking specifically about admission criteria for elderly patients, and whether exceptions could be made. That evening, Rose noticed a beautiful flower arrangement beside her bed with a card that read simply, "Wishing you strength. BH." The seasons changed from autumn to winter, and with it the atmosphere at Harrison Estate subtly shifted. Emma noticed small changes in Blake, lingering glances, questions about her grandmother, even occasional offers to use his driver for hospital visits during snowstorms. One frosty December morning, Emma arrived to find a package on the kitchen counter with her name. "Mr. Harrison left that for you," Walter explained. "He said you might need it." Inside was an expensive wool coat, far nicer than anything Emma could afford. A note read, "Boston winters are harsh. This is practical, not charity." BH Emma's first instinct was to return it, but the bitter wind had cut through her thin jacket all week. Practicality won over pride. Later that day, while dusting Blake's study, Emma noticed a folder labeled Walker Rose Treatment Options. Her hands trembled as she opened it, revealing detailed research on her grandmother's condition and potential treatments, including Harrison Pharmaceuticals experimental therapy. "Snooping, Miss Walker?" Blake's voice made her jump. Emma turned, clutching the folder. "You've been researching my grandmother's condition?" Blake approached, taking the folder from her hands. "I was curious about the treatment she needs." "Why?" Emma asked, searching his face. "Professional interest," he replied, but his eyes told a different story. "Your company's trial has strict eligibility requirements," Emma said. "Grandma Rose is too old according to the criteria." Blake's jaw tightened. "Age-based exclusions are standard practice." "But they shouldn't be," Emma countered. "Older patients need innovative treatments too. The pharmaceutical industry isn't run on compassion, Miss Walker." "Maybe that's the problem," Emma said quietly. Blake studied her, something like respect flickering in his eyes. "Perhaps." A tense silence stretched between them until Blake's phone rang. After a brief conversation, he turned to Emma. "I need to return to the office, take the evening off with pay, visit your grandmother." "That's not necessary." "It's not a request, Emma." It was the first time he'd used her first name. The informality lingered between them, changing something fundamental in their dynamic. That evening at the hospital, Emma was surprised to find Rose looking better than she had in weeks. The strangest thing happened, Rose told her. A specialist came by today, said he was from Harrison Pharmaceuticals. He asked all sorts of questions about my condition. Emma's breath caught. Did he mention why? Said they were reevaluating candidates for their trial. Rose squeezed her granddaughter's hand. Emma, that nice young doctor seemed to think I might qualify after all. Later that night, Emma sent a text to the number Blake had given her for emergencies. Whatever you did today, thank you. The reply came just before midnight. I did nothing. But if I had, it would be because talent for healing shouldn't be wasted on dusting. Emma smiled at her phone, realizing that beneath Blake Harrison's cold exterior beat a heart capable of unexpected kindness. The question was, why did he work so hard to hide it? The January storm that hit Boston was the worst in decades. Roads closed, power lines fell, and Emma found herself unable to leave the Harrison estate after her shift ended. The massive house creaked and groaned against the howling wind as Emma paced near the windows, worried about her grandmother. The hospital has generators, Blake said, appearing in the doorway with 2 steaming mugs. Your grandmother is safer there than most people in the city tonight. I know, Emma sighed, accepting the offered tea. I just hate not being there for her. Blake gestured for her to join him by the fireplace, where logs crackled and cast dancing shadows across the room. Walter has prepared the blue guest room for you. The phones are down, but I've managed to get through to Boston Memorial on my satellite phone. They're fine. You called to check on the hospital? Emma asked, surprised. I called to check on Rose, Blake corrected, his voice softer than usual. She's comfortable and playing cards with the nurses, apparently. Emma studied him in the firelight. This enigmatic man who could be coldly distant one moment and unexpectedly thoughtful the next. Why did you really help get her evaluated for the trial? Blake stared into the flames. I recognized something in you that first day, the look of someone willing to sacrifice everything for family. He paused. I respect that. Your parents, Emma said gently. You lost them young like me. Blake nodded, his expression distant. They were brilliant scientists. My father founded Harrison Pharmaceuticals to develop treatments for rare cardiac conditions. The irony was, when they had their accident, the very treatment that might have saved them was still in his lab, unfinished. Is that why you continued his work? I continued his company, Blake said, a subtle distinction. The work became something different after he died. What changed? Blake's eyes met hers, surprisingly vulnerable. The board brought in practical minds to guide the orphaned heir. Profit margins replaced patient outcomes as the primary goal. Emma understood suddenly. That's why you were researching my grandmother's treatment. It's connected to your father's original work. The cardio-regenerative therapy was his dream. It's taken 20 years to finally reach clinical trials. Blake's voice grew bitter. But now it's being limited to the patients most likely to maximize shareholder value. The age restrictions, Emma realized. Exactly. Blake set down his mug. The night we met, you said sometimes life doesn't follow the path we plan. What would you have done if life had gone according to plan? Emma smiled softly. I'd have finished nursing school, specialized in geriatric care, opened a community clinic perhaps. Why geriatrics? Blake asked, genuinely curious. The elderly have so much wisdom to share, yet our healthcare system often treats them as disposable. She hesitated. No offense to your company. None taken. It's the truth. Blake studied her with newfound respect. You'd have made an excellent nurse, Emma. The power chose that moment to fail completely, plunging the room into darkness save for the firelight. In that golden glow, something shifted between them. Professional boundaries temporarily suspended by the storm raging outside and the unexpected intimacies shared within. I should show you to your room, Blake said finally, his voice oddly gentle. As they navigated, the darkened hallways by candlelight. Their shadows merged on the walls behind them, impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. February arrived, bringing with it a noticeable thaw, both in the weather and in Blake's demeanor. Emma found herself no longer jumping when he unexpectedly entered a room, and Blake seemed to seek out her company, often timing his coffee breaks to coincide with her kitchen duties. One afternoon, Emma was surprised to find Blake leaning against the counter when she entered with a basket of laundry. "How's Rose today?" he asked, something that had become his standard greeting. "Much better," Emma smiled. "The doctors are amazed at her response to the preliminary treatments. They're officially considering her for the full trial now." Blake nodded, a hint of satisfaction crossing his features. "Good." "I know you had something to do with it," Emma said softly, "though you'll never admit it." Instead of his usual denial, Blake surprised her by changing the subject. "I'm attending the Harrison Pharmaceuticals charity gala this Saturday. It raises funds for patients who can't afford experimental treatments." "That sounds wonderful," Emma replied, folding a tablecloth. "I'd like you to accompany me," he said, so matter-of-factly that Emma nearly missed the significance. She froze. "As what exactly?" Blake looked uncomfortable for the first time in their acquaintance. "As my guest." "Your guest?" Emma repeated slowly. "Not your employee?" "Is that so difficult to imagine?" A hint of vulnerability flashed in his eyes. Emma set down the laundry. "Mr. Harrison." "Blake," he corrected. "After sheltering together during a blizzard, I think first names are permitted." "Blake," she conceded, her heart beating faster. "I don't belong in that world. I wouldn't know how to act, what to wear." "Just be yourself. That's more than sufficient." He hesitated. "As for attire, I've taken the liberty." He gestured toward a garment bag hanging by the door that Emma hadn't noticed. "You bought me a dress?" Emma was torn between offense and something dangerously close to pleasure. "Consider it part of your job requirements," he said, a hint of his old arrogance returning. "The company is making a major announcement about expanding the cardio-regenerative trials. Having someone there who understands the patient perspective would be valuable." Emma realized he was offering her an explanation that preserved her dignity, framing the invitation as professional rather than personal. "In that case, I accept," she said, surprising herself. Was that relief in his eyes? "Excellent. My driver will collect you at 7. As he turned to leave, Emma called after him. "Blake?" He paused at the doorway. "I'd like to visit my grandmother before the gala. Would that be possible?" Blake nodded. "Of course. I'll arrange for the driver to take you early." After he left, Emma approached the garment bag with trepidation. Inside was an elegant emerald gown that somehow looked exactly like something she would have chosen herself, had she unlimited resources. That evening, Emma sat beside Rose's hospital bed, confessing her confusion about the evolving relationship with her employer. "Be careful, dear," Rose warned, though her eyes twinkled. "But remember, sometimes the most guarded hearts are the ones most worth reaching." As Emma left, she noticed a familiar figure at the nurse's station, Blake, deep in conversation with Rose's doctor. When he spotted Emma, he quickly concluded his conversation and approached her. "Just checking on some trial details," he explained, almost apologetically. Emma didn't believe him for a second, but simply smiled. "See you Saturday." As they parted ways in the hospital corridor, their hands brushed accidentally. The brief contact sent an electric current through Emma that lingered. Long after they'd said goodbye, Saturday evening arrived with crystalline clarity. Emma stood before the mirror in her tiny apartment, barely recognizing the woman reflected back. The emerald gown fit perfectly, accentuating her figure while maintaining elegance. She'd styled her honey-brown hair in a simple updo, allowing a few tendrils to frame her face. When the doorbell rang, Emma's heart fluttered nervously. But instead of Blake, his driver stood waiting. "Mr. Harrison will meet you at the event, Miss Walker," he explained, opening the car door. The venue was a historic Boston hotel, its grand ballroom transformed into a glittering wonderland. Emma entered hesitantly, immediately feeling out of place among the city's elite. Women dripped with diamonds while men in tuxedos discussed stock options and yacht purchases. Emma. She turned to find Blake approaching, devastatingly handsome, in his tailored tuxedo. Something shifted in his expression when he saw her, surprise, appreciation, and something deeper she couldn't name. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you," she replied, warmth spreading through her. "Though I feel rather like an imposter." Blake offered his arm. "You belong here more than most of these people. At least you understand what tonight is actually about." As he guided her through the crowd, Emma noticed the curious glances and whispered comments. Blake introduced her to various executives and donors, always keeping her close. When they reached a silver-haired man with piercing eyes, Blake's grip on her arm tightened slightly. "Dr. Reynolds, my research director," Blake explained. "This is Emma Walker." "Ah, the caretaker with the grandmother in our new trial expansion," Reynolds said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "How charitable of you to include her tonight, Blake." Emma felt Blake stiffen beside her. "Miss Walker has medical training. Her insights have been invaluable." Before Reynolds could respond, a striking blonde woman in a red dress approached, placing her hand possessively on Blake's arm. "Blake, darling, you've been avoiding me." "Vanessa," Blake acknowledged coolly, extracting himself from her touch. "I've been busy." Vanessa's calculating gaze shifted to Emma, assessing her with obvious disdain. "And who's this? New staff?" Emma felt herself flush, but Blake answered before she could. "Emma is my guest tonight, Vanessa. Emma, this is Vanessa Mitchell, a former acquaintance." "Former fiancé," Vanessa corrected sharply. "But Blake and I have a way of finding our way back to each other, don't we, darling?" The tension was palpable. Emma suddenly felt like a pawn in some complex game she didn't understand. "If you'll excuse us," Blake said firmly, guiding Emma away. "The announcement is about to begin." As they walked toward the stage, Emma whispered, "Former fiancé?" "A mistake I don't care to discuss," Blake replied tersely. The formal presentation began, with Blake taking the podium to announce the expansion of the cardio-regenerative trial to include elderly patients. When he acknowledged the courage of these pioneers, his eyes found Emma's in the crowd. "Sometimes," he said, "we need someone to remind us of our original purpose, to heal regardless of profit margins or demographic conveniences." Later, as a string quartet played, Blake led Emma to the dance floor. His hand at her waist felt both foreign and strangely right. "You did well tonight," he murmured. "Even with your ex-fiancé glaring daggers at me?" Emma asked lightly. Blake's expression darkened. Especially then, as they swayed to the music, Emma couldn't ignore how perfectly they fit together, nor the intensity in Blake's eyes when he looked at her. But neither could she forget Vanessa's parting words as they'd left the gala. "He'll tire of his little charity project soon enough. He always comes back to me." The Monday following the gala, Emma arrived at Harrison Estate early as usual, unsure where she stood with Blake. Their dance had left her confused, the way he'd held her, looked at her, spoken to her. It had felt like more than employer and employee, more than friends even. She was arranging fresh flowers in the foyer when Blake emerged from his study, dressed for the office. "Good morning," he said, stopping to admire her work. "The flowers are lovely." "Thank you," Emma replied, suddenly conscious of how domestic the scene must appear. Her arranging flowers in his home, him preparing to leave for work. Like a married couple from another era. About Saturday night, Blake began, uncharacteristically hesitant. "It was a beautiful event," Emma said quickly, saving him from whatever awkward statement he'd been formulating. "Thank you for including me." Blake stepped closer. "That's not what I wanted to discuss. I wanted to apologize for Vanessa's behavior." "You don't need to apologize for her." "Perhaps not. But I feel responsible nonetheless." He paused. "Our engagement ended 2 years ago. She refuses to accept it's over." Emma carefully placed another stem in the arrangement. "May I ask why it ended?" Blake's expression darkened. I realized she was interested in the Harrison name and fortune, not me. He hesitated. There was an incident. She altered some company documents to benefit her father's business. When I confronted her, she showed no remorse. I'm sorry, Emma said sincerely. Don't be. It was a valuable lesson. Blake checked his watch. I have a meeting, but I'd like to continue this conversation. Would you join me for dinner tonight? The invitation hung between them, a clear step across the employer-employee boundary. Emma knew she should refuse, maintain professional distance, yet something in his eyes made refusal impossible. I'd like that, she said simply. That evening, Emma found herself seated across from Blake in his rarely used formal dining room, sharing a meal prepared by his chef, who had discreetly disappeared afterward. Candlelight flickered between them as Blake poured her a glass of wine. How was your visit with Rose today? He asked. Wonderful. The doctors are amazed by her progress. Emma smiled. She asked about you, actually. Blake looked surprised. Me? She's not fooled by the administrative reconsideration explanation for her acceptance into the trial. She knows someone with influence intervened. Blake shifted uncomfortably. The trial's expansion to include elderly patients was scientifically sound. The age restriction was arbitrary to begin with. Still, Emma said softly, thank you. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, moving from Rose's condition to Blake's work, to Emma's abandoned nursing career, to books they'd both read. Emma found herself laughing more than she had in years while Blake revealed a dry wit she'd never suspected he possessed. As the evening progressed, Emma realized with startling clarity that she was falling for Blake Harrison, the complicated, guarded man beneath the billionaire facade. After dinner, they moved to the library where Blake showed her his father's original research journals. He would have approved of the trial expansion, Blake said, carefully turning pages filled with his father's handwriting. He always believed healing should be available to everyone. He sounds like a remarkable man, Emma said, standing close beside him. He was. Blake looked up, their faces now inches apart. The air between them seemed charged with electricity. Blake's phone rang, shattering the moment. He glanced at it with annoyance, then concern crossed his features. I have to take this. It's the hospital. Emma's heart dropped. Grandma Rose? No. Blake reassured her quickly. It's about the trial. As he stepped away to take the call, Emma tried to collect her thoughts, to remind herself of the vast differences in their worlds. Yet when Blake returned, his expression troubled. Those differences seemed suddenly insignificant. Is everything all right? She asked. Just a minor issue with the trial protocols, he said, though his furrowed brow suggested otherwise. Nothing for you to worry about. But as Emma left that evening, she couldn't shake the feeling that something important had been left unsaid, both about the trial and about what was developing between them. Emma hummed softly as she organized the medical journals in Blake's library. In the 3 weeks since their dinner, something had shifted between them. Lingering glances, hands brushing accidentally, conversations that stretched late into evenings. Though neither had put words to this evolving relationship, Emma found herself looking forward to each day at Harrison Estate in a way that had nothing to do with her paycheck. Today, Blake was attending meetings at Harrison Pharmaceuticals, leaving Emma to her duties with unusual instructions. Feel free to use the library for your own research. Your nursing knowledge shouldn't go to waste. Taking his suggestion, Emma was comparing cardiac treatment protocols when she accidentally knocked over a stack of files on Blake's desk. As she gathered the scattered papers, a document caught her eye, her grandmother's name printed at the top. Her hands trembled as she read the clinical evaluation. Rose had originally qualified for the trial 6 months ago but had been removed by order of the research director, Dr. Reynolds. A handwritten note in the margin read, Harrison aware of age-based exclusion policy. Approved 12/15. The date was ICU, weeks before Emma had started working at the estate. Emma felt sick. Blake had known all along that Rose qualified but was excluded. He'd let Emma believe he was helping when in reality, He was part of the system that had denied her grandmother treatment in the first place. She was still staring at the document when Blake returned early. "Emma, what are you doing at my desk?" His voice shifted as he saw what she was holding. "Those are confidential company documents." Emma looked up, eyes blazing with betrayal. "My grandmother was eligible for the trial months ago. You knew about the age discrimination policy. You approved it." Blake's face paled. I didn't." For once, the eloquent businessman was at a loss for words. "Did you hire me out of guilt? Was this all some twisted game?" Emma's voice cracked. "Let the desperate granddaughter clean your house while you play savior?" "Emma, please." Blake stepped toward her. "The document doesn't show the full picture. Reynolds implemented that policy without proper board review, but you knew about it," Emma interrupted, "and did nothing until you met me." Blake ran a hand through his hair. "The trial expansion was already in development when we met. Reynolds was fighting it." "Why should I believe you?" Emma gathered her things. "You let me thank you for helping Grandma Rose when you were partly responsible for denying her treatment in the first place. That's not fair." Blake's voice hardened. "You have no idea what I've been dealing with at the company." "You're right, I don't," Emma cut him off. "Because I'm just the housekeeper, aren't I? Not someone you'd actually share your business concerns with." "That's not how I see you." "It doesn't matter how you see me." Emma moved toward the door. "I trusted you. I thought you were different." "Emma, wait. I'm taking the rest of the day off to be with my grandmother. I'll send someone for my things. Tomorrow." "You're quitting?" Blake looked genuinely shocked. "I can't work for someone I don't trust." She paused at the doorway. "I thought there was something real developing between us, but how can anything real be built on lies?" As Emma walked out of Harrison Estate, tears streamed down her face. She'd allowed herself to fall for Blake Harrison, brilliant, complex, occasionally kind, believing he was becoming a better man. Instead, he'd known all along about the policy that nearly cost her grandmother's life. At the hospital, Rose immediately noticed Emma's distress. "What happened, dear?" she asked, patting the bed beside her. As Emma explained, Rose listened with her characteristic wisdom. "Sometimes," Rose said finally, "good people get caught in bad systems. The question isn't whether Blake made mistakes, but whether he's trying to correct them." But Emma couldn't forgive so easily. That night, she applied for 3 different jobs, determined to rebuild her life without Blake Harrison, no matter how much her heart protested. 3 weeks after leaving Harrison Estate, Emma was exhausted. She'd taken 2 jobs, morning shifts at a coffee shop and evening receptionist work at a small medical office, barely making enough to cover Rose's supplemental care costs. The trial was continuing, thankfully, but Emma had refused all contact from Blake, returning his calls and letters unopened. The apartment felt emptier somehow, despite it being exactly as it had always been. Emma curled on her worn sofa, nursing a cup of tea, trying not to remember the warmth of Blake's library or the way his eyes crinkled when he almost smiled. Her phone rang, the hospital's number. Her heart lurched. "Hello? Emma, dear." Rose's voice was reassuringly strong. "I'm fine, so don't panic. But I thought you should know. Blake Harrison visited me today." Emma sat up straight. "He what? Why?" "To apologize, primarily." Rose paused. "And to make sure I understood that regardless of what happened between you two, my treatment wouldn't be affected." "How generous of him," Emma said bitterly. "He looks terrible, Emma, like he hasn't slept in weeks." "Good," Emma said, though her heart twisted traitorously. Rose sighed. "He asked me to tell you that he's made significant changes at Harrison Pharmaceuticals. Dr. Reynolds has been removed as research director." Emma hadn't expected that. "Fired?" "Apparently." Blake said Reynolds had been manipulating trial data for years, excluding elderly patients to inflate success rates. Emma closed her eyes. Memories flooding back. Blake's troubled expression after phone calls, his cryptic comments about the original mission of the company, his visible tension around Reynolds at the gala. "He should have told me what was happening," Emma whispered. "Perhaps," Rose agreed, "but from what I gather, he was gathering evidence before making accusations. That's not the action of someone who approved of the policy." After hanging up, Emma found herself staring at the business card Blake had pressed into her hand the day she'd left, his private number scrawled on the back. She'd kept it, despite everything. Meanwhile, at Harrison Pharmaceuticals, Blake sat alone in his office surrounded by documents. The internal investigation had revealed worse corruption than he'd imagined. Reynolds had been falsifying data for years, endangering patients while enriching himself through kickbacks from insurance companies that benefited from denying expensive treatments to elderly patients. The company was in turmoil, but Blake felt nothing but cold determination. He'd allowed this to happen through inattention, trusting people who didn't deserve trust while the company drifted from his father's original mission. "Mr. Harrison?" His assistant interrupted his thoughts. "The board is assembled." Blake nodded, gathering his files. Today he would announce a complete restructuring of the company's research division and the establishment of a new geriatric treatment initiative, a program specifically designed to develop treatments for elderly patients. As he addressed the stunned board members outlining his plans with unwavering conviction, Blake realized he was channeling Emma's passion. Everything he was doing now was influenced by her moral clarity, her compassion, her unwavering belief that healthcare should serve patients of all ages. "This isn't just ethically right," he concluded. "It's good business. An aging population needs treatments designed for their unique physiology." Hours later, exhausted but satisfied with the board's reluctant approval, Blake returned to his empty mansion. Without Emma's presence, the place felt cold and lifeless again. He walked to the library where they'd spent so many evenings, picking up a medical journal she'd bookmarked. A folded paper fell out, a sketch Emma had made of her community clinic dream, with notes about geriatric-focused services. Blake stared at it, an idea forming. That night he began drafting plans for the Rosewalker Center for Geriatric Medicine, a clinic that would provide specialized care regardless of patients' ability to pay. All he needed was someone with the vision and heart to run it, but first he needed her forgiveness. Emma hurried through the hospital corridors, her steps quickening as she approached her grandmother's room. The unexpected call from Rose's doctor had left her breathless with worry. "Nothing serious," he'd assured her, "but something you should see for yourself." She pushed open the door, preparing herself for the worst, only to freeze in astonishment. Rose was sitting up in bed, surrounded by doctors and nurses, looking more vibrant than Emma had seen her in months. "Emma!" Rose exclaimed, waving her over. "Come see this." Dr. Chen, Rose's primary physician, greeted Emma with a smile. "Your grandmother's latest tests show remarkable improvement. The cardio-regenerative therapy is working better than we anticipated." Emma approached cautiously, scanning the monitoring equipment and charts. Her nursing training allowed her to understand enough. Rose's heart function had improved by nearly 30%. "This is incredible," Emma whispered, taking her grandmother's hand. The skin felt warmer, the grip stronger. "Tell her the rest," Rose urged the doctor. Dr. Chen nodded. "Harrison Pharmaceuticals has expanded the trial parameters. All participants will now receive the full treatment course regardless of age, and follow-up care will be covered for 5 years beyond the trial period." Emma's heart stuttered. Blake had done exactly what he'd promised, not just for Rose, but for everyone. "There's more," Rose said, reaching for a glossy folder on her bedside table. "This came for you this morning." The folder bore the Harrison Pharmaceuticals logo. Inside, Emma found detailed plans for something called the Rosewalker Center for Geriatric Medicine, along with a personal letter from Blake. "Emma, words cannot adequately express my regret for the hurt I've caused you. When we met, I was already investigating discrepancies in our trial protocols, but I failed to be transparent with you about the challenges I was facing at the company. You reminded me of what Harrison Pharmaceuticals was supposed to be, my father's dream of healing without discrimination. With Reynolds removed, we're rebuilding the research division with new ethical guidelines that prohibit age-based exclusions. The enclosed plans represent something more personal. Your grandmother's courage as a trial participant has inspired a new approach to geriatric care. The Rosewalker Center would be independently operated but fully funded by Harrison Pharmaceuticals. I'm not offering this as atonement or to win your favor, but because your vision for compassionate elder care deserves to exist in the world. The position of medical director would be yours, should you wish to complete your nursing degree, also fully funded. Whether or not you accept, know that meeting you changed everything. You showed me that running a successful company and doing the right thing aren't mutually exclusive. With deepest respect, Blake Emma's hands trembled as she studied the architectural renderings. The clinic was exactly as she'd imagined it, down to the community garden she'd once described to Blake during a late-night conversation. He had been listening, truly listening. "He comes to visit me, you know," Rose said softly. "Not just to check on the trial results. He sits and talks with me about you." Emma looked up, surprised. "What does he say?" Rose patted her granddaughter's hand. "That he's never met anyone with your compassion and integrity. That hurting you was the greatest regret of his life." Emma swallowed hard. "He lied to me, Grandma." "Did he? Or did he simply fail to tell you everything while he was still gathering facts?" Rose's eyes were gentle but probing. "There's a difference between deliberate deception and painful omission while fighting a broken system from within." Later that afternoon, Emma found herself standing outside Harrison Pharmaceuticals' downtown headquarters, clutching the folder. She hadn't planned to come here. Her feet had simply carried her. The receptionist's eyes widened in recognition. "Miss Walker, Mr. Harrison isn't expecting you, but it's all right," Emma said. "Is he available?" "He's in a meeting, but..." The woman was interrupted by the elevator doors opening to reveal Blake deep in conversation with several executives. He stopped mid-sentence when he saw Emma, hope and uncertainty warring in his expression. "Emma, I need to speak with you," she said simply, "about the Rosewalker Center." Blake immediately dismissed his colleagues and guided Emma to his office, a corner space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor. Unlike the cold opulence of his mansion, this space felt lived in, with books stacked on surfaces and whiteboards covered in scientific notations. "I wasn't sure you'd read the proposal," he said, closing the door. "I almost didn't," Emma admitted, placing the folder on his desk. "Why name it after my grandmother?" "Because she represents everything the medical system typically overlooks. Wisdom, resilience, the value of life at all stages." Blake hesitated. "And because I know how much she means to you." Emma studied him carefully. The man before her looked different, thinner with shadows under his eyes, but somehow more authentic than the polished billionaire she'd first met. "You fired Reynolds." Blake nodded, "and reported his data manipulation to the FDA. He'll likely face criminal charges." "That couldn't have been easy. He was your research director for years." "It was necessary." Blake's voice hardened. "He betrayed everything my father stood for. Patients died because treatments were withheld based on his falsified conclusions about efficacy in older populations." Emma moved to the window, gathering her thoughts. "The clinic plans, they're exactly what I described that night in your library. I remember everything you've ever told me, Emma." The simple honesty in his voice made her turn back to face him. "Why are you doing all this? The trial expansion, the clinic, it must be costing millions." "It is." Blake approached, stopping a respectful distance away. "But I'm not doing it to impress the board or shareholders. I'm doing it because it's right, because my father would have wanted it." He paused. "Because you helped me remember why I became a doctor in the first place before I let myself be consumed by the business side." "You have a medical degree?" Emma asked, surprised. "MD, PhD in cardiology and molecular biology. I rarely practice, but yes." A sad smile crossed his face. "Another thing I set aside when I took over the company." Emma felt pieces clicking into place. His detailed knowledge of treatments, his ability to understand complex medical research, his frustration with Reynolds' ethical violations. The clinic position, Emma said carefully. You're serious about me finishing nursing school? Completely serious, you have the heart and mind for it. Blake hesitated, but the offer stands regardless of anything else between us, no strings attached. The sincerity in his eyes was unmistakable. This wasn't manipulation or an attempt to buy her forgiveness. It was Blake trying to make things right, not just with her but with the world. I need time, Emma said finally, to think about everything. Blake nodded. Of course. He reached into his desk and removed a key. This is to my father's research cabin in Vermont. All his original work is there. I'm going up this weekend to review his notes on geriatric applications for the therapy. You'd be welcome to join me, purely professionally, to see where the treatment helping your grandmother originated. Emma hesitated, then took the key. I'll think about it. As she turned to leave, Blake called after her. Emma? She paused at the door. Whatever you decide about the clinic or anything else, I want you to know that meeting you made me a better person, a better doctor. That gift is something I can never repay. Emma felt tears threatening. Without trusting herself to speak, she nodded once and left, the weight of the key in her palm feeling strangely like possibility. The drive to Vermont took Emma through winding mountain roads, blanketed with early spring greenery. Following the GPS coordinates Blake had given her, she found herself increasingly remote from civilization, climbing higher into the secluded landscape. Part of her still couldn't believe she'd decided to come, yet here she was, drawn by curiosity about the origins of the treatment saving her grandmother's life, and perhaps, though she hesitated to admit it, by the man behind it all. When she finally rounded the last bend, Emma's breath caught. The cabin was actually a beautiful wooden structure nestled against a mountainside, large windows reflecting the afternoon sun. A sleek black SUV was already parked in the gravel driveway. Before she could reach the front door, it swung open, to reveal Blake, dressed more casually than she'd ever seen him in jeans and a simple sweater. You came, he said, relief evident in his voice. I almost didn't, Emma admitted, stepping inside with her overnight bag. The interior was a surprising blend of rustic charm and cutting-edge technology. One entire wall was dedicated to bookshelves, filled with medical texts, while another featured a state-of-the-art laboratory setup. A fire crackled in a stone hearth, casting dancing shadows. My father built this place as a retreat from corporate pressure, Blake explained, taking her bag. When he needed to remember why he became a scientist, he'd come here to work without interference from investors or board members. Emma moved to the wall of windows overlooking a stunning valley vista. It's beautiful. There's a guest room upstairs, Blake said, maintaining a careful professional distance. I've prepared dinner, but I thought you might like to see my father's original research first. He led her to a room that functioned as a private laboratory and archive. Glass cabinets contained meticulously preserved notebooks, while digital screens displayed molecular structures that rotated slowly. This is where it all began, Blake said, his voice softening with reverence. He pulled out a leather-bound journal. My father's first notes on cardiac regeneration, dated 2 years before his death. Emma carefully opened the journal, finding pages filled with elegant handwriting and detailed illustrations of cellular structures. What struck her most was the passion evident in the margin notes. Not about profits or patents, but about patients who might benefit. He specifically mentioned elderly patients here, Emma noted, pointing to a passage. Blake nodded. That was his primary focus. He saw how older patients were routinely excluded from innovative treatments. His own mother, my grandmother, died after being denied an experimental procedure due to her age. That's why the age restrictions in your company's trials felt like such a betrayal of his vision, Emma said, understanding dawning. Exactly. Blake ran his hand over the journal. When Reynolds implemented those restrictions, he presented them as standard industry practice. I accepted that explanation, distracted by expansion plans and quarterly reports. His expression darkened. Until I met you and Rose. Emma studied him, seeing genuine remorse. You should have told me what was happening. I know. Blake met her eyes directly. I was gathering evidence against Reynolds, trying to understand how deep the corruption went. But that's no excuse for leaving you in the dark. They spent hours, reviewing the journals, Blake explaining the science behind the treatment while Emma asked questions from her nursing perspective. The conversation flowed naturally, their shared passion for medicine bridging the emotional distance between them. As evening fell, they moved to the kitchen where Blake surprised Emma by preparing a simple but delicious meal. They ate at a rustic, wooden table, the conversation turning to Rose's remarkable progress. Her latest results are inspiring the research team to explore new applications, Blake said, pouring Emma a glass of wine. Her resilience is extraordinary. She's always been that way, Emma smiled, relaxing slightly. When my parents died, she never faltered despite her own grief. She simply became everything I needed. She raised an exceptional granddaughter. The compliment was offered simply, without agenda. Emma felt her cheeks warm. The clinic plans, she said, changing the subject, they're incredibly detailed. I had architects work from your sketches, Blake admitted. The construction company is ready whenever you decide. You're really giving me complete control? Blake nodded. It would be independently operated with guaranteed funding from Harrison. Pharmaceuticals for 10 years. Your vision, your leadership. Why? Emma asked the question that had been haunting her. Why go to such lengths? Blake set down his glass, considering his words carefully. Initially it was about making amends, but it's become something more, a return to purpose. My father didn't build his company to maximize shareholder value. He built it to heal people. He paused. You reminded me of that. After dinner, they settled before the fireplace with coffee. The atmosphere between them had softened, professional, discussion gradually giving way to more personal conversation. I've been thinking about what happened, Emma said finally, about why I reacted so strongly when I found that document. Blake waited silently, giving her space to continue. It wasn't just about Rose, she admitted. It was about us, what I thought was happening between us. Finding out you knew about the policy made me question everything. Wonder if I'd imagined the connection we were forming. You didn't imagine it, Blake said quietly. What I feel for you is more real than anything I've experienced, but I understand why my silence breached your trust. The firelight illuminated his features, revealing a vulnerability Emma had rarely glimpsed. She was about to respond when her phone rang. The hospital's number flashing on the screen. Grandma, Rose, she said, panic edging her voice as she answered. Blake moved closer, concern evident as Emma's expression shifted from fear to confusion to relief. That was Dr. Chen, she explained after hanging up. Rose's latest test results show such significant improvement they want to document it as a case study. They're calling it unprecedented recovery for her age group. That's wonderful news, Blake said, genuine joy lighting his features. Emma nodded, eyes suddenly filling with tears. For months I thought I was going to lose her. Now. She couldn't continue. Without thinking, Blake reached for her hand. Now she has a future again. The simple gesture, his warm fingers wrapped around hers, broke something in Emma. All the fear, stress, and heartache of the past months crashed over her at once. Blake hesitated only a moment before drawing her into his arms, holding her as she finally allowed herself to release emotions she'd been controlling for so long. I'm sorry, she whispered, against his shoulder. I didn't mean to fall apart. You haven't fallen apart, Blake said softly, stroking her hair. You've been incredibly strong. Sometimes strength means allowing yourself to feel. Emma pulled back slightly, looking up at him. The tenderness in his eyes undid her final reservations. When he hesitantly touched her cheek, she leaned into his palm. I've missed you, he confessed. more than I thought possible. The kiss happened, naturally inevitable as gravity. Gentle at first, then deepening as months of tension and longing dissolved between them. Emma felt herself responding, her body remembering the connection they'd begun to form before everything shattered. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Blake rested his forehead against hers. I know we have more to resolve, more to discuss, but I need you to know that what I feel for you is real, Emma. It always has been. The cabin's phone rang, shattering the moment. Blake answered, his expression quickly shifting to alarm. When? He demanded. Was anything taken? He listened intently. I'll be there first thing tomorrow. Double the security, meanwhile. He hung up, turning to Emma with grim determination. Someone broke into my office at Harrison Pharmaceuticals. They accessed the trial data servers. Who would do that? Emma asked. I have my suspicions. Blake's jaw tightened. Reynolds had accomplices within the company. Or? He hesitated. Or what? Vanessa has been making threats since I ended our engagement. She has connections to pharmaceutical competitors. Emma remembered the calculating blonde from the gala. What would she gain from stealing trial data? That's what worries me. Blake ran his hand through his hair. The most valuable data is Rose's. Her unprecedented recovery could be worth millions if someone wanted to patent a modified version of the treatment. We have to go back, Emma said immediately, thinking of her grandmother. Blake nodded, already, reaching for his phone. I'll arrange for security at the hospital. Rose won't be left unprotected. As they hurriedly packed their belongings, Emma realized something fundamental had shifted between them. Despite the new crisis, they were operating as partners, united by concern for Rose and determination to protect the treatment helping her. In the car, racing back toward Boston through the darkness, Blake reached across the console to take her hand. Whatever happens, we face it together this time. No secrets, no holding back. Emma squeezed his hand in return. Together, neither of them noticed the sleek car following at a discreet distance, its driver reporting their every move to someone who had been waiting for exactly this opportunity. They reached Boston shortly after dawn, the city streets still quiet as Blake drove directly to Boston Memorial Hospital. Emma's heart pounded with each passing mile, her mind racing through worst-case scenarios. Rose first, then the office, Blake said, pulling into the hospital parking lot. I need to know she's safe before anything else. The urgency in his voice touched Emma deeply. His concern for her grandmother wasn't performative, it was genuine. When they reached Rose's room, Emma nearly collapsed with relief. Her grandmother was peacefully asleep, monitors showing normal readings. A security guard Blake had arranged sat discreetly outside. She's fine, Emma whispered, squeezing Blake's hand. Thank you for protecting her. Blake nodded, tension visibly easing from his shoulders. I should get to the office. The security team will have preliminary reports about the breach. I'm coming with you, Emma said firmly. We're in this together, remember? At Harrison Pharmaceuticals, chaos reigned. Security personnel, IT specialists, and concerned executives crowded the executive floor. Blake moved through them with authority, Emma at his side. What do we know? He demanded of his head of security. The breach was sophisticated, the man explained. They targeted the clinical trial database, particularly focusing on the cardio-regenerative therapy records. Blake's expression darkened. Any leads? Security footage shows someone using Dr. Reynolds' old access card, which should have been deactivated. We're enhancing the images now. I want to see them, Blake insisted. In the security office, they reviewed grainy footage of a slender figure in dark clothing. The face was obscured, but something about the movement pattern struck Emma as familiar. Wait, she said. Play that again. As they watched the figure move through Blake's office with confident familiarity, Emma's suspicion grew. That's not Reynolds, it's Vanessa, isn't it? Blake studied the footage more carefully. The height and build match. And she knows this office. She's been here dozens of times. What would she want with the trial data? Leverage, Blake said, grimly. Or revenge. They were still discussing possibilities when Blake's phone rang. The blood drained from his face as he listened. When? He asked sharply. No, don't do anything. We're coming now. What is it? Emma asked, heart racing. Vanessa is at the mansion. She says she has information about Rose's treatment that I'll want to hear. They drove in tense silence to Harrison Estate. As Walter let them in, his usually impassive face showed concern. She's in the library, sir. She refused to leave. Blake squeezed Emma's hand. You don't have to face her. Yes, I do, Emma replied. Whatever she's planning, we confront it together. Vanessa Mitchell sat in Blake's favorite chair, looking triumphant. When she saw Emma, her smile turned venomous. How domestic. The billionaire and his little charity case united at last. What do you want, Vanessa? Blake demanded. She held up a flash drive. I have proof that your miracle treatment has potentially fatal side effects in elderly patients, side effects that were deliberately concealed. Emma's heart stopped. You're lying. Am I? Vanessa smiled coldly. The data shows 3 elderly patients died during early trials. That information was buried. Blake stepped forward. Those deaths occurred when Reynolds was manipulating the data. They weren't caused by the treatment, they were caused by his withholding of proper dosages from elderly patients. The medical board won't see it that way when I release this. Vanessa's voice hardened. Unless, of course, you're willing to negotiate. What do you want? Blake asked, though he clearly already knew. Reinstate me as head of public relations, return my shares in the company, and end whatever this is. She gestured dismissively at Emma. Before Blake could respond, Emma stepped forward. You're bluffing. The modified treatment is saving lives, including my grandmother's. For now, Vanessa said ominously. But the long-term effects? Who knows what might happen to dear Grandma? Rose in, say, a few months? The implied threat made Blake's control finally snap. Enough, you're threatening a patient's life for corporate position? You'll be facing criminal charges. Vanessa laughed. Prove it. It's your word against mine. Actually, came Walter's voice from the doorway. It's your word against this. He held up his phone, which had been recording the entire conversation. Vanessa's composure cracked. As she lunged for the phone, Blake intercepted her, catching her wrist. It's over, Vanessa. As security arrived to escort Vanessa out, she hissed at Emma. He'll tire of you. Playing savior is just his latest distraction. Emma met her gaze steadily. You never understood him at all, did you? Later, as they sat in Blake's study waiting for the police, Emma realized something profound had shifted. The breach that had once seemed insurmountable had been healed, not by grand gestures or the clinic plans, but by facing danger together, by choosing trust when it mattered most. 6 months after Vanessa's arrest for corporate espionage and patient endangerment, Emma stood in the sunlit atrium of the newly completed Rose Walker Center for Geriatric Medicine. The space was exactly as she had imagined, warm, welcoming, filled with plants and comfortable seating that dignified its elderly patients. Her nursing degree hung framed in her office alongside her medical director certification. When Blake had first proposed she complete her education, Emma never imagined she'd finish so quickly or with such honors. Penny for your thoughts? Blake's voice came from behind her. He wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. Just admitting you were right, Emma smiled, leaning into him. About me being capable of this. I never doubted you for a moment, he murmured, kissing her temple. The center was already making headlines for its innovative approach to geriatric care. Rose herself was the first patient advocate, her remarkable recovery inspiring others. You ready? Blake asked, checking his watch. Everyone's waiting in the garden. Emma nodded, suddenly nervous. The ribbon-cutting ceremony would officially open the center to patients tomorrow, but today was for something more personal. In the garden designed for patient rehabilitation, their closest friends had gathered. Rose sat in the front row, beaming with pride as Emma took her place beneath an arch of white roses. When Blake joined her there, Taking her hands in his, Emma knew with absolute certainty that this man, this work, this life they were building, together, was exactly where she belonged. 2 years later, Emma sat in the rocking chair on the porch of what had once been Harrison Estate, but was now simply home. The mansion had transformed alongside its owners, still elegant but filled with warmth, laughter, and life. Rose dozed in the sunshine nearby, her health now stable enough that she'd moved in with them permanently. From the garden came the sound of Blake's voice as he guided a group of senior patients through a gentle Tai Chi class, part of the expanded wellness program that had made the Rose Walker Center famous nationwide. Emma's hand rested on her rounded belly, feeling the gentle kicks of their daughter. Blake had cried when they learned they were having a girl, whispering that she would be brilliant and compassionate like her mother. The Harrison Pharmaceuticals Elderly Care Initiative had expanded to fund similar centers in 12 states, with plans for international expansion. Blake still ran the company, but with a renewed commitment to his father's original vision, healing over profit, innovation for all ages. Thinking deep thoughts? Blake asked, climbing the steps to join her after his class finished. Just grateful, Emma replied, taking his hand and placing it where their daughter was kicking. For everything that led us here. Blake knelt beside her chair, his eyes reflecting all the love she'd once thought impossible to find. From housekeeper to my heart's keeper, he said softly. You saved me, Emma. We saved each other, she corrected gently. As the sunset painted the sky in brilliant colors, Emma reflected on their journey, from suspicion to trust, from isolation to family, from broken systems to healing change. What had begun as a desperate job application had become a life more meaningful than she'd ever imagined possible. And as Blake kissed her tenderly, their unborn daughter dancing between them and Rose smiling in peaceful sleep nearby, Emma knew that sometimes life's hardest detours lead exactly where we're meant to be.